And good day. We are coming on the air right now with breaking news and a historic moment for Cuba. In just a moment, the Justice Department is expected to announce an indictment against former Cuban leader Raúl Castro for the shootdown of two civilian planes in 1996, piloted by the humanitarian group Brothers to the Rescue that killed Cuban Americans. Castro was accused of ordering the Cuban Air Force to shoot down those planes, which belonged to a group that carried out rescue missions to save Cubans fleeing their homeland. The Justice Department's event is being held at Miami's Freedom Tower on Cuba Independence Day, marking the official birth of the Republic back in 1902. The four victims of the are also expected to be honored. Today's indictment marks a significant step in the escalating tensions between the U.S. and Cuba as the Trump administration ramps up its pressure against the current regime led by Miguel Diaz-Canel. I want to bring in NBC's Jesse Kirsch, who is at the Freedom Tower right now in Miami. We understand this event is set to start in just a few minutes.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. We're about 15 minutes behind schedule, but we just heard someone come to the microphone and asking people for a second time to take their seats. You mentioned we are at the Freedom Tower. There's a lot of symbolism around this building itself. This was back in the 60s and 70s known as the Cuban Refugee Center, effectively an Ellis Island for Cuban asylum seekers trying to flee the Castro regime and come to the United States. As you mentioned, this is all centered around the Brothers to the Rescue shootdown back in February of 1996. I had the chance to speak with Miriam de la Pena, the mother of one of the people who was killed in that incident, and she referred to Raúl Castro as the mastermind of that shootdown back in the 90s. This has been a major point of contention for decades between the Cuban and U.S. governments. Cuba at the time had said that those planes had violated its airspace. The U.S. said that was not the case. Congress said these planes were unarmed. You mentioned this is a group that has carried out humanitarian missions. They also had at times penetrated Cuban airspace, dropping pro-democracy leaflets over Havana. But President Clinton, then President Clinton at the time in 1996, said that this was a violation of international law. Miriam de la Pena, I spoke with her earlier. Again, she referred to Raúl Castro as the mastermind of this incident, and she also said that the push for justice has been on the shoulders of the families, and that today's event would mark this becoming something that is put on the shoulders of the U.S. Department of Justice to seek accountability for these families. And of course, as you mentioned, Tom, this is coming on Cuban Independence Day, a day that Secretary of State Marco Rubio also put out a message to the Cuban people. The translation provided by the State Department, he says that the Trump administration is offering a new Cuba, and the Secretary of State saying, quote, "The only thing standing in the way of a better future are those who control your country." The question is, what happens after this announcement? Is there bite to go with this bark? What would the U.S. government be willing to do to bring Raúl Castro to American justice, Tom?
Jesse, for our viewers across the country who are watching this, they may be a little confused because usually when an indictment is announced, it's announced at a news conference setting. Here you have all the symbolism you were talking about. You have a raucous crowd behind you, and that's because for the Cuban American community down there in South Florida and really all over this country, this has been 30 years in the making. This was something that happened to their community. It was Cuban Americans, some of who actually served in the Vietnam War, that were shot down by Cuban fighter jets, civilian aircraft that were trying to help people who were out at sea, struggling in rafts, throwing them down water and then notifying the Coast Guard, humanitarian missions completely, and yet they were blown out of the sky by missiles, by warcraft. And the Cuban American community has waited a long time for this, and that is why there's such a huge crowd there behind you.
Yeah, and Tom, the group, Brothers to the Rescue, was credited with saving upwards of 10,000 lives. So this was not some trivial effort. This was something that was having real impact at a time when there were so many people in the dangerous, treacherous waters between Cuba and Florida trying to get here. It's something, of course, that has been popularized in pop culture, in films over the years as well. And you talked about the symbolism over the last 30 years. You could argue even that Raúl Castro, holding the Castro family in some way accountable incredible, something that goes back decades even beyond that. And one of the individuals who was involved with that flight from Brothers to the Rescue, who actually survived and made it back to the U.S., was also a veteran of the Bay of Pigs attempt back in the 1960s. Of course, Miami has been the center of the Cuban expat community for decades, and certainly has become a political force and an ally of the Trump administration as well. So there are just so many different forces at play here today. And as you mentioned, a loud crowd, hundreds of people in this room. We're getting to the point of the year where it gets quite hot in Miami, and it is very warm in this room right now, Tom, with so many people here waiting for the acting Attorney General, the Florida Attorney General, U.S. Attorney, someone from the FBI leadership as well. So many leaders expected here at both the state and the federal level. The sheriff of Miami-Dade County is here. This is something that is national, but it's also so local here in Miami.
Yeah, we do also want to mention the Cuban government had accused Brothers of the Rescue of violating Cuban airspace. These were allegations by the Cuban government, we should say that, of dropping leaflets across Havana, pro-democracy leaflets. I want to get to Kelly O'Donnell because it's important to say what is actually in this indictment. Kelly, do we know exactly what the case is here? Because that's the big question today.
Well, there's more suspense, Tom, because we do not have the actual document. What we do know is that a judge has moved to unseal the indictment, and we have a list of names, Raúl Castro, the most notable among them, and others who would be alleged co-conspirators here. So waiting on the specific charges, but we know the context, and you and Jesse have been laying that out. This is part history. It is part a cultural moment for the Cuban American community. It is a part very current day diplomacy as the Trump administration is trying to pressure the Cuban regime. And we expect that this indictment, according to sources who have told us it is coming, will attempt to right this 30-year wrong as the Justice Department sees it, and certainly many in the room gathered there, where that kind of boisterous setting reflects the passions that are fueling this long-time effort by the Department of Justice to seek charges. Now, it comes also at a time when we are in a post-Maduro world, where the Venezuelan leader was taken out of his country, brought to the United States for justice. The link between Venezuela and Cuba in terms of the economic piece is so critical here. And a through line in all of that is Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Tom, you just spoke with him recently on the trip in China, and you know the backdrop of this. He has been born and raised as a son of Cuban exiles and has, in his professional life, been pushing for greater steps for the Cuban people to be free and for Venezuela to undergo the changes it has. So we wait for the specific document. We can presume that this will include a murder count. There is no statute of limitations for murder. So if people are wondering why something 30 years ago could be relevant today, that's our first sort of informed piece of guidance on that. But there could be other counts as well. And this also brings into play, as you've discussed, the humanitarian piece, where this group was trying to rescue people who were fleeing Cuba at that time 30 years ago. Thousands of them, and they lost their lives in the process. And so their families, those who believe in their cause and in the community, have wanted a day of justice. And simply by the table setting here, with the acting Attorney General traveling to Miami, the Deputy FBI Director in Miami, the Senator Moody from Florida, other dignitaries. As you pointed out, typically this would happen on Pennsylvania Avenue here in Washington in the press conference room at the Department of Justice. This is very different. So all of the sort of stagecraft of this moment gives you a sense of what it means to the people and the international implications as well.
Kelly, stand by for us. I do want to bring in Jose Diaz-Balart. No one on our NBC News team has covered this story more than Jose, so I'm so happy we're able to have him on our coverage right now. Jose, Kelly mentioned something very important. The charge here may be murder, and it actually may go further than that. It may be premeditated murder. And the reason for that is that we now know that Cuba at the time had something set up called the WASP network. This was a network of spies that had infiltrated not only the CIA, not only the chambers of Congress, but had infiltrated Brothers to the Rescue. They had a spy that was working as a pilot. The Cubans knew where those Brothers to the Rescue planes were headed and what they were doing. They had the intelligence, and prosecutors have laid out in the past that the Cubans knew this was going to happen. They wanted to kill these pilots, and that's exactly what they did.
Tom, your knowledge shows just how complicated these things can be, but also how in this indictment today that is just about to be released, but in this motion to unseal it, it includes Raúl Castro Ruz, who was the man in charge of the military in Cuba. Officially, he still is in many ways, but also the other names that are included: Lorenzo Alberto Pérez Pérez, Emilio José Palacio Blanco, José Fidel Gual Barzaga, Raúl Simanca Cárdenas, and Luis Raúl González Pardo Rodríguez. These are all pilots or people on board those MiGs that on the 24th of February in 1996, 30 years ago, shot down those two Brothers to the Rescue planes. There was a third plane, Brothers to the Rescue plane, that had Jose Basulto, the leader and head of Brothers to the Rescue, and Silvia Oriondo, who was a passenger on that plane. They were able to escape essentially by going into the clouds when one of those MiGs veered off to try and knock them down as well. The people that were on board those MiGs, all those MiGs that both shot down the two Cessnas and went after the third Cessna, and they were not able to find them, are listed on this motion to unseal this indictment. So we have to see, but murder is definitely something that is a part of this indictment. It doesn't expire. And so that's the difference, for example, with what we saw legally, what the United States presented against Nicolás Maduro for the January 3rd seizure of Maduro. They based it on the document. It wasn't murder. And in 1989, when the United States went after the leader of Panama and successfully extricated him from Panama, brought him here to South Florida, where he served decades in prison, that was also used to bring the legal aspect of it into play. We've got to see, Tom, what they have here on Jose, the anniversary of the independence of Cuba.
Right. Two key pieces of evidence. There are radio transmissions of the MiG pilots celebrating the death of these civilian pilots from America. I do want to stress these were American pilots that were shot out in the air and killed by those MiG jets. There's radio transmissions of them celebrating and laughing that they had blown them out of the sky. And then there is a second transmission that has been picked up by intelligence that has been reported on. It would have to be proven in court, which would be very hard, that it's purported to be Raúl Castro saying he had knowledge of this, that he knew about this. Now, that piece of evidence may be hard to prove in court, but these are clues. These are evidence that prosecutors, if this case does go to trial, are likely to present to a jury.
Indeed, and over the years, Fidel Castro himself said that he was behind giving the order and that he and Raúl are behind that. Tom, I see that the press conference is about to start at the Freedom Tower in Miami.
Yeah, the acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, is there. Let's listen in to hear as they begin.
President of Miami-Dade College, welcome to the Freedom Tower. Today we gather at the Freedom Tower for a solemn and meaningful occasion as we welcome representatives from the United States Department of Justice, community leaders, families, honored guests to commemorate the legacy of the Brothers to the Rescue and honor the victims whose lives were tragically lost in this pursuit of freedom. This ceremony is deeply significant because we stand here at the Freedom Tower, our Freedom Tower, a place that represents refuge, resilience, and enduring hope for those who came to America seeking liberty after fleeing a tyranny and oppression in Cuba. So many of our parents, our uncles and aunts, walked through these doors, 400,000 of them, looking for hope and opportunity. Today is their day. For generations of Cuban exiles, this building became more than a processing center. It became a symbol that freedom was still possible, a symbol that democracy, human dignity, and human rights matter. Today, we remember the 4 brave men of the Brothers to the Rescue, whose lives were taken on February 24th, 1996. Not in war, but during a humanitarian mission rooted in compassion and in courage. Their sacrifice became a painful reminder to the world of the brutality of the Cuban regime and the high price so many have paid for speaking freely, defending democracy, and standing for human rights. We also recognize the countless victims who have suffered under the Cuban regime across generations, prisoners, families separated by exile, those silenced for dissonance, and all who have endured persecution, all in the pursuit of freedom and dignity. Their stories, our stories, are part of the larger story of Cuba, but also the part of the story of Miami and this Freedom Tower itself. As we gather today, may we honor the memory of those not only with reflection, but with renewed commitment to truth, to justice, and to the preservation of the democratic values for future generations. Thank you for being here today for this important commemoration. May God bless each of you, and may God bless the United States of America. And to our brothers and sisters in Cuba, we hear you. Freedom will come. Cuba will be libre. It is now my distinct honor, representing all of you, to introduce the United States Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here in the great state of Florida. Today, we are announcing an indictment charging Raúl Castro and several others with conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals. Mr. Castro and the others are charged with additional crimes as well, including destruction of aircraft and 4 individual counts of murder. The indictment was returned by a grand jury sitting in this district in Miami on April 23rd, 2026, and was unsealed today. For nearly 30 years, the families of 4 murdered Americans have waited for justice. On February, this is a story all too familiar. On February 24th, 1996, 2 civilian aircraft operated by Brothers to the Rescue were shot down over international waters by military aircraft from Cuba. 4 men were killed: Carlos Costa, Armando Alejandre Jr., Mario de la Peña, and Pablo Morales. They were unarmed civilians and were flying humanitarian missions for the rescue and protection of people fleeing oppression across the Florida Straits. As alleged in the indictment, Raúl Castro and 5 co-defendants participated in a conspiracy that ended with Cuban military aircraft firing missiles at those civilian planes and killing 4 Americans. Those are the allegations returned by a federal grand jury. My message today is clear. The United States and President Trump does not and will not forget its citizens. I want to say that we also do not forget the families, the loved ones, and the friends who have carried grief and heartache for 30 years. For the first time in nearly 70 years, senior leadership of the Cuban regime has been charged in this country, in the United States of America, for acts of violence resulting in the deaths of American citizens. Nations and their leaders cannot be permitted to target Americans, kill them, and not face accountability. President Trump is committed to restoring a very simple but important principle. If you kill Americans, we will pursue you, no matter who you are, no matter what title you hold, and in this case, no matter how much time has passed. I want to thank, and everybody in this room should thank, the FBI, the prosecutors, and the agents who worked on this matter. It includes the intelligence community and our federal and state law enforcement partners. They did the work here, so thank you. There's a reason why myself and the senator and other leadership are here and not in Washington, D.C. to announce this indictment. The community here, you all, understands the history of the Cuban regime better than anyone in America. Many families here know the cost of oppression. I've heard stories over the past week and past months, every one of them heartbreaking. They know that the pain caused by the regime did not stop at the island's shores. And today's indictment, while it does not bring back the murdered victims, it makes a statement. The United States government has not forgotten these innocent men who were shot out of the sky. And as in every criminal case, the defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty by a jury of their peers. But today, the Department of Justice has taken an important step and brought this indictment. I'm proud to stand here on this podium with U.S. Attorney Jason Redding Quinones to my right, Chris Rea, Deputy Director of the FBI. You're gonna get to clap. You're gonna get to clap for Jason in 20 seconds. Chris Rea, Deputy Director of the FBI, and James Utheimer, the Attorney General of this great state. And your great U.S. Senator is here as well. She's very busy in D.C., but wouldn't miss this for the world. So thank you for being here, Senator Moody. So I want to thank Jason for his leadership down here in Florida. He's doing a great job beyond today, and I'd also ask him to replace me at the podium to say a few words. So thank you, Jason, very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. It may sound a little repetitive, some of the things we're saying, but they're worthy of saying twice, 3 times, 100 times. So bear with us. For nearly 70 years, the communist Cuban regime has acted with impunity in its systematic repression of its people. And for the last 30 years, this regime's senior leadership has gone unchallenged for its murder of 4 Americans. Today, the United States announces a historic indictment charging Raúl Castro and 5 co-defendants for their roles in the February 24th, 1996 shoot-down of 2 brothers to the rescue. A Miami grand jury has charged these defendants with conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals, destruction of aircraft, and 4 counts of murder. The victims were 4 unarmed civilian pilots engaged in humanitarian work: Carlos Costa, Armando Alejandre Jr., Mario de la Peña, and Pablo Morales. They were not combatants, they were not armed, and they posed no threat. According to the indictment, Raúl Castro, then minister of the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces, authorized and oversaw a military chain of command that ended with Cuban fighter jets firing air-to-air missiles at civilian aircraft over international waters. Those missiles destroyed the planes without warning and killed all aboard. For 30 years, the families have waited. The Miami community has waited, and our country has waited. Today is a step towards accountability. This is the first time in almost 70 years that a senior leadership of the Cuban regime has been charged in the United States for acts of violence resulting in the death of Americans. The passage of time does not erase murder. It does not diminish the value of those lives, and it does not weaken our commitment to the rule of law. Standing here in the Freedom Tower gives this moment added meaning. This is the Ellis Island for Cuban refugees. It was the main processing center for countless exiles who fled communist Cuba with the hopes of reaching the American dream. My own mother spent her first night in the United States in this very building. After fleeing brutal communist Cuba, like so many families in Miami, mine understands what it means to arrive here with little more than hope and a chance to rebuild under the protection of American law. That history reminds me of the duty we carry, a duty to seek justice for victims, a duty to stand with families who have carried this pain for decades, and a duty to make it clear that those who kill Americans cannot simply wait out American justice. Today's date, May 20th, also carries deep meaning for the Cuban people. It is their 4th of July. It marks Cuba's independence from colonial Spain. It reminds us that the pursuit of freedom, dignity, and accountability spans generations and still lives alive and well in the heart of the Cuban community. Today's indictment is one part of that long effort. When I came into office in August of last year, I made reviving this case a priority, and I want to thank the team that made it happen. My first assistant, U.S. Attorney Yara Lorenzo Calucas, and my Assistant United States Attorneys, Abby Waxman and Mike Gilfarb. In conjunction with FBI Miami's Cuba Squad, which we're not going to name or show their faces, for their commitment and drive to seeing this case through. It's incredible work. I also want to thank Mr. Attorney General for his incredible support and steady leadership of the department. And before I conclude, I also want to acknowledge the assistance of Florida Attorney General's office. Attorney General James Uthmeyer and his team have been strong partners in this effort. Their support reflects the best of federal and state law enforcement working together in service of justice. With that, I turn the podium over to FBI's Deputy Director, Chris Rea. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I specifically want to thank the Attorney General and, of course, the U.S. Attorney here for allowing me to speak to you all today. And I also want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to showcase the small part that the FBI played. As was stated, today marks a significant moment in a long, long journey for justice. A journey that began 30 years ago with an unprovoked attack on American lives. 4 humanitarians were on a noble mission to help those fleeing oppression. Instead, their lives were violently taken in a reckless act by the Cuban regime. The FBI, the Department of Justice, and countless others never forgot them, and we never stopped hunting for the truth. Today's announcement shows that if it's 5 months, 5 years, 5 decades, we will keep pursuing you, and we'll keep pursuing anyone who intends to harm our citizens, and they will face American justice. I'd like to thank our dedicated special agents, our dedicated prosecutors, our dedicated intelligence analysts, and our dedicated professional staff, as well as our counterintelligence program, for never giving up. Enormous credit is due to the many teams across the 16 different FBI cases regarding this matter. The teams who have worked to hold members of the Cuban government's WASP network accountable. Our people have systematically and relentlessly searched for evidence, conducted countless interviews, and pieced together critical intelligence for nearly 3 decades. They turned dead ends into fresh leads. And over the years, that hard work has paid off with convictions of multiple operatives for activities related to that vicious shoot-down. The charges we announced today are only the latest milestone on that road to justice, a road paved with persistence, partnership, and extreme resolve. To anyone who spies on our country or harms our citizens, know this: the FBI, the Department of Justice, has a long memory. We will come after you, and we will find you. As I close, I'd like to close with a personal anecdote, as this is deeply personal to me. You see, I was a former member of the United States Coast Guard right here in Miami Beach in Key West, Florida in the 1990s. I conducted numerous humanitarian missions with my fellow Coast Guardsmen, rescuing Cuban citizens who were just trying to find a better life. I also was fortunate enough to act as security during remembrance ceremonies held at the 12 nautical mile limit just outside of Cuban territorial waters. I served on Coast Guard cutters that provided the security to the friends and family who were just trying to remember their lost loved ones. So for me, today brings everything full circle. So in that vein, we dedicate all 3 decades of casework to the memories of the loved ones lost that day. To the victims' families and friends, we stand with you as we hold those responsibilities to account. Now, I'm going to turn it over to the U.S. Senator of this great state, Senator Moody. Thank you.
What a day. What a day. 3 months ago, I joined you on the anniversary to mark the killing of Carlos, Armando, Mario, Pablo, and I said it was not a cold case. It was never a cold case. It was never a whodunit. We always knew who was responsible for the killing of those young men. That was 3 months ago. And I am so proud to join you today to say we're finally bringing justice to those families, and not just those families. Everyone sitting here today for the past 30 years who have kept this case hot, who have met with me as the Attorney General, who repeatedly met with law enforcement, who repeatedly met with leaders, so many who came together and kept that case hot, like those that are no longer with us, like Lincoln Diaz-Balart. He would be right here in the front row today. They kept it hot. And just 3 months later, we are standing here on this important day when Cuba became a free state, a free people, to say we are living up to bringing accountability to the Castros and the regime that stole that independence. That's what we're doing today. It's an honor to be here today with our acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, as the indictment is unsealed against others, but particularly against Raúl Castro for his role in the Brothers to the Rescue murders. This moment has been decades in the making, and I want to thank all of the lawyers who read over all of the trial transcripts, the weeks and weeks of trial transcripts that put back together every piece of evidence and waited for that last piece of evidence to come into view and into your possession, and never gave up. And never gave up. For so many Cuban families, they know you can never become complacent in defending liberty, in fighting for freedom. And Florida is the symbolism of fighting for freedom. We're in the beating heartbeat of that for this nation. So I thank you. Thank you for being here today and remembering what it's like to hold tyrants accountable. And it is why I applaud the Department of Justice for bringing these charges. You know, previous administrations, as those of you met with leadership, reminded them of 30 years ago what happened, previous administrations would release the one person we convicted related to it. Maybe even go down there and go to a baseball game. The last administration decided we were going to, I don't know, relax our banking restrictions or whatever, maybe coddle them into freedom. But not this administration. They took the bold step of actually bringing accountability and understanding that accountability works. So we thank President Trump for recognizing that, for being brave and bringing justice for these 4 men, for their families, and indeed for freedom. And I want to tell you, when Governor DeSantis appointed me to be your newest United States Senator, he did so and said, I want you to take everything you know about this state, every person you've met with, everything you've learned, every battle you've fought to make Florida what it is, take that to Washington and let's get things done. And I am so proud to be here today to say we got things done. And so on today, May 20th, on the day that Cuba became a free and independent state, I would like to end my visit with you by reading the following. And it is a penalty sheet in the Southern District of Florida, United States District Court. advising that Raúl Castro will face count 1, conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals, facing a maximum term of imprisonment of life imprisonment. Counts 2 and 3, destruction of aircraft, facing a maximum term of imprisonment on each count of up to 5 years in prison. And counts 4 through 7, the charges of murder, facing a maximum term of imprisonment on each count of death or life imprisonment. God bless you. God bless this great free state of Florida and our United States of America.
Good morning. It's an honor to be here and support Attorney General Blanche, Senator Moody, and your great United States Attorney, Jason Redding Quinones. Communist revolution always begins with the same utopian lie, a classless, stateless paradise of abundance and freedom. But we know the reality. In reality, there is no abundance, nor freedom. Rather, it obstructs individual personal property rights, suffocates merit, and centralizes total power in the hands of tyrants. We've seen what communism has brought us. Over 100 million people that have lost their lives, engineered famines, and the total destruction of human liberty. Just 90 miles from our Florida shorelines, the Castro family has ruled the island with an iron fist. For nearly 50 years, Raúl Castro directed the armed forces and served as chief enforcer. The very man who traded the promise of revolution for a prison state. And under his command, and to this day, Cuba remains a dungeon. Political dissidents are ripped from their homes at night under fabricated charges. They're dragged through the streets, beaten, and imprisoned for decades. I know this pain is all too real for many of you in this room. The people have long suffered because of that communist regime. And today that hits very close to home here in the Freedom Tower with the brothers to the rescue. Raúl Castro ordered those fighter jets to shoot down unarmed civilian aircraft. It was not an accident. It was intentional, premeditated, state-sanctioned murder. And their criminal conspiracy violated Florida's sovereignty. They embedded spies here in Miami and across jurisdictions down into the Florida Keys, revealing the intelligence that would put these civilian aircraft in the crosshairs. And yet for too long, leaders in Washington looked the other way. They sat by idly. They even attended baseball games with the very man that directed the murders. Not anymore. We're blessed to have a president, Donald J. Trump. We are blessed to have a president in Donald J. Trump who will not bend the knee for communist tyrants. And we are blessed to have Attorney General Blanche and your United States Attorney that advance justice and rule of law and who are not going to politically weaponize government. It's an honor to support them in this endeavor. Last year, right after I took office, I directed our prosecutors to reopen the investigation into the Castros and these murders. Working hand in hand with the U.S. Attorney and supporting his team, we are today one step closer to advancing justice. And the cooperation between the United States and state of Florida could not be more critical than today. Americans deserve justice. Floridians deserve justice. The family members of these men that lost their lives, they deserve justice. Now, going forward, let me be crystal clear. There can be no future for a free Cuba so long as the Castros and their criminal gang of thugs remain in power. We now have the leaders that will pursue that which is right and just. That I know. So get ready. There's more to come. God bless America, and God bless the free state of Florida.
So we're going to just take a couple questions, although the questions should be directed to the reason why we're here today and not something else. So are there other reporters? Pierre.
Attorney General Blanche, key question, why now? Was there a breakthrough in this case? Can you speak to the evidence that leads you to believe that Raúl Castro directly participated in the deaths of those Americans who were killed? And I have a follow-up.
Well, I cannot explain or justify why now as opposed to 2 decades ago or 30 years ago when it happened. But what I can say is that you just heard a lot of people talk about a ton of work that the FBI did, state and local intelligence communities, our U.S. Attorney and the Attorney General's, the State Attorney General's team. And that evidence was presented to a grand jury in late April, and an indictment was returned. So I can't, as far as what the evidence is, well, a lot of it's in the indictment, and it would not be appropriate or fair to comment outside of the indictment about the evidence. But as you guys know, a grand jury is presented with evidence and then returns an indictment to the extent that they believe there's probable cause that a crime has been committed, which a grand jury certainly did here.
And quick follow-up, what are the prospects that you could get Raúl Castro to the United States to face justice, given the situation there, and what steps are the U.S. willing to take to get him back here?
Well, we indict men outside of this country all the time, and there's all kinds of different ways that we get them here. The reason why we indict somebody is because we want them here to face justice in front of a jury of their peers. So. How we go about doing that obviously depends on the circumstances in the case, and I'm not going to go beyond that, but we expect that we didn't indict. This isn't a show indictment. This is an indictment because we expect that there was a warrant issued for his arrest. So we expect that he will show up here by his own will or by another way and go to prison. All right, next question. Yep, go ahead.
Are any others in the Castro family potentially tied up in this? Could there be other charges from members in the Castro family from the Castro regime?
Well, as you just heard, this is an indictment in some ways 30 years in the making there is not a prosecutor in this room or an FBI agent in this room that ever stops investigating. So whether there will be additional charges, whether there are additional defendants charged, who knows? But an investigation like this is never over. And so I assure you the men and women who have been working tirelessly on this case for the past several months, years, are not just going to retire. So you just point to somebody. I don't.
Good afternoon. Many Cuban Americans are elated, emotional, hopeful on a day like today. What do you tell the Cuban community who is happy about today's announcement, but is wondering how you pursue these charges? What comes next?
I mean, that's the same question I just answered. I think that there's a process that happens, right? And so what's the first process is it's a charge, it's an indictment, and that happens all across this country constantly. And then the next question is, okay, so when is this guy going to show up and you know, appear in court and have a trial or what have you? And I would say to those that wonder whether this is just an indictment and we're going to go away, we're not. So go ahead. Yes, the blue shirt. Yeah. I'll go to the middle next.
Attorney General Blanche, we would like to know what would be the next step to, a lot of people are wondering if there will be any sort of attack, military response from the United States, if this now indictment gives permission for the United States to be closer to Cuba and, again, get Raúl Castro and those others implicated here to the United States.
So I'm the acting Attorney General of the Department of Justice. We bring charges. So the question you asked is a question that involves the Department, the President of the United States, the Secretary of War, the Secretary of State, and doesn't involve the acting Attorney General. So what I can tell you is that this is this indictment, as we've said a bunch of times today, is a result of a lot of hard work and what we believe is an important step in bringing some semblance of justice to the families and friends and loved ones of these men who were murdered. But beyond that, I'm not going to talk about what could happen with Cuba beyond that. Yes, go ahead.
Attorney General Gloria Ordaz from Telemundo 51. Thank you for this opportunity. The next step is going to be an arrest warrant, and I ask you this because the Cuban exile would love to see Raúl Castro in the same position of Nicolás Maduro. And a lot of legal experts that we have interviewed during these days have said that Raúl Castro, that this indictment will be more symbolic than practice, and that Raúl Castro should probably die in Cuba. What is your message for them?
Well, I'm not going to compare cases, for one. For two, like I said a few minutes ago, we indict men who are not physically within the United States all the time. This is not a new endeavor or adventure for us. And so the way that we get people here who are charged with a crime varies. There's all kinds of different ways. And this is not, you know, there's an arrest warrant issued for a reason, because we certainly expect and believe that Mr. Castro is entitled to his day in court right here in Miami. Sue, yep.
Thank you, sir. Jesse Kirsch with NBC News. You mentioned that the grand jury approved these charges weeks ago. Curious to know what, if any, role the CIA director's visit to Cuba in recent days played in deciding to move forward with announcing this indictment. And I had one
I'm not going to get into why we decided to unseal the indictment today, except to note the place that we're standing and the important day that today represents. But yes, you're right. There's a lot of factors that go into when a sealed indictment is unsealed, if ever. And so beyond just the fact that, look, by the way, it wasn't that long ago. It was late April. It's mid-May. So.
Thank you. One other question. When if people look at this and say this is at least partially just a pretext to push for regime change in Cuba. What would you say to people who take that perspective?
I don't care what people look at and think. I mean, we returned an indictment, and that's what we're here to talk about. If people want to speculate or think what they will, I don't care. Okay, one more question. Blue.
Hi. So the final speaker. Oh, thank you. Hi, I'm Deborah Acosta with the Wall Street Journal. The final speaker mentioned or hinted at a potential team of people that has been put together to lead the country. Who are those people? Are they in the United States? Are they in Cuba? Is it a mix of both? Can you share a little bit more about that team?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. Can you say it again?
At the final speaker mentioned that there is a team of people that's going to lead this forward.
Final speaker. So why don't we let the final speaker address that?
And thank you for the new nickname.
Yeah, very good.
Will ever be known as the final speaker.
That's probably easier to pronounce than my last name, Uthmeyer, but I don't think I referenced what you're saying. Where I talked about people spread across the state, I was talking about the spies and the criminal conspiracy that the evidence has revealed took place. There were spies working from Miami all the way down to the Florida Keys, gathering intelligence and providing it to the regime to figure out where these aircraft were going to be and put them in harm's way. As far as other geopolitical things, I'm going to stay in my lane for now. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes the press conference on behalf of Miami-Dade College and the Freedom Tower. Thank you so much for being here, and you may go upstairs to an exhibit, Libertad.
All right, we've been listening to officials from the Justice Department and FBI announce a historic indictment against former Cuban leader Raúl Castro and 5 other members of Castro's regime, along with a pilot that was involved in that shootdown. They have been charged with conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals, 2 counts of destruction of aircraft, and 4 counts of murder for the 1996 shootdown of the Brothers to the Rescue aircraft. The indictment marks a major step towards accountability for the deaths of 3 American citizens and 1 U.S. resident on February 24th, 1996. Who were killed when their civilian aircraft was shot out of the sky during a humanitarian mission to save Cubans fleeing their homeland in rafts along the Florida Straits. Officials say the indictment accuses Castro of authorizing and overseeing a military chain of command that ended with Cuban fighter jets firing, air-to-air missiles at unarmed civilian aircraft over international waters. I want to get right over to Jose Diaz-Balart, who's been tracking this with us as well. Jose, the leader of Cuba right now, Miguel Diaz-Canel, has just put out a post on X. What is he saying? What is he telling the Cuban people?
Indeed, among other things, he is saying that it is a lie, and I can look as we go on screen with this. I'll translate parts of it. Some are now saying cynically that there is no blockade of oil to Cuba, that everything that the Cuban people suffer is because of the Cuban government. They, according to Diaz-Canel, lie. He also says that on that 24th of February of 1996, when the Cuban regime attacked 3 unarmed Cessna planes over international waters, that Cuba was acting in a legitimate defense of its authority within jurisdictional waters, and that the Brothers to the Rescue group is actually a narco-terrorist organization. Tom, I've been reading the indictment, and it's a speaking indictment. It's not just the declaration of the charges, but there is a narrative that points very directly to Raúl Castro's responsibility in any decision that was taken to knock down those planes. And it also includes a narrative of what you were talking about at the beginning of this special report, which is the spy agencies that existed in South Florida, sent by the Castro regime to South Florida specifically to spy on Brothers to the Rescue and other organizations in South Florida. They then mandated training of these MiG pilots to fly in the coordinates around where the Brothers to the Rescue planes flew. And so there is premeditation as far as this spoken indictment is, and it all leads directly to Raúl Castro because he was in charge of the armed forces, hand in hand with Fidel Castro. It's important to remember that the same people who took power in January of 1959 in Cuba, in January of 1959, when the United States had 48 states, are the same people that today Raúl Castro is in charge of that regime, and he has handpicked this Miguel Diaz-Canel, who is today saying that it is a lie and that organization were narco-terrorists.
Jose, I just want to be clear here. So to go back, the leader of Cuba is trying to say the Brothers to the Rescue was a narco-terror group. And I just want to get a quick fact check here that is completely not correct and has never, ever been proven. These were Cessna jets that were simply armed with water and humanitarian aid, correct? That were dropped down to people that were struggling at sea.
No, absolutely. The planes did, however, in January, overfly Havana briefly at one point, and they dropped paper leaflets over the streets of Havana. Raúl Castro, also in that recording, one of two recordings at least that exist, talked about that and how he had thought about having the military knock down the planes that were overflying Havana, dropping leaflets, and decided not to, but that the next step would be when they were over international waters.
Jose, stand by for us. I do want to tell our viewers we're waiting to hear from some of the family members of those pilots who were shot down, those Cuban American pilots that were shot down by the Cuban MiGs. I do want to get to Kelly O'Donnell first to kind of go through some of this terminology we heard from the acting attorney general. He said this is not a show indictment. And Kelly, I've been going through it during this news conference, and he's right. There is not a lot of, I would say, smoking gun evidence here, at least when it comes to Raúl Castro. Essentially, as Jose pointed out, the one piece of evidence they say is that as leader of the military, he greenlit all the operations and that they had trained these MiG pilots to focus on small aircraft. They had done this for a couple months in the lead up to the shooting. But beyond that, we don't see a smoking gun here. Is that a fair assessment of the indictment the way we see it?
Based on what I've read through, it's about 19 pages, Tom, and part of it gives you a sense of the history of this case and some of the specifics, about as specific as it gets, is what you're referring to. It says all orders to kill by the Cuban military traveled through this chain of command with Castro and his brother Fidel Castro as the final decision makers. It also talks about after they had identified the presence of these flights in the area, that they had pilots practicing locating and following low, slow-flying civilian aircraft like the ones used by the group involved here. So it gives you some of that sort of tactical work that they have evidence, they believe, to support that. And really relying on a chain of command, that if in the Cuban structure at that time that Raúl Castro was the defense minister and was in the position to give the, as they describe it here, the kill order, that is evidence they're laying out. It includes some photographs and things. They don't read well when they're printed, but you get a sense of it. It shows you the aircraft and a picture of Castro at the time. Now, I think the biggest question right now is where is Castro and what happens to him? Right. Because we have seen in many cases where there are people who are indicted abroad, who are not brought to the United States, who evade that kind of justice within a jurisdiction where this indictment came down. We don't have, based on our reporting, any indication of any specific attempts to try to extract him. Our colleague Jesse Kirsch, who was in the room, asked about the visit of the CIA director. And it would be hard for me to imagine that circumstances like this would not have been discussed in some way, not necessarily revealing this indictment, but talking about the kind of legal peril Castro could face and using that as a leverage point. That'll take more reporting to sort out. But that's the context and why Jesse's question was relevant here.
Kelly, to go back to the indictment, because I think this is very important, if we compare this indictment to the Maduro indictment, they are very different. The Maduro indictment had times and places. It named narco traffickers that members of Maduro's family had met with. I mean, there were several instances where they looked like they were connecting drug trafficking directly to Nicolas Maduro. Not that the U.S. may not have more evidence against Raúl Castro, But, I think the acting attorney general got ahead of maybe some of the headlines saying this is not a show indictment. And that essentially means we're not going to lay out all the evidence we have. We're not going to overwhelm the readers of this with the facts that we may have or may not have.
And certainly the time and place is very different. So the charges against Maduro are far more contemporary. This is 30 years ago against a hostile adversary where there might have been limitations on the kind of evidence the U.S. could obtain. They have obtained some of this that gives sort of the working operational details of how these flights were targeted and then shot down. But you're right. This is not the kind of contemporary crime in play being recorded and tracked by federal authorities based on what we're seeing here. We'll, of course, wait. Will there be a trial and will evidence be presented in court? But it is a historical narrative. It is details about the individuals, not only Castro, but 5 others. As we've discussed, they were pilots as a part of this mission. And there will be enormous pressure now politically and both domestic politics for the United States and international politics for the administration. But for the Department of Justice, and for the Trump administration, this is an opportunity to check a box that has been waiting for a very, very long time on serious charges that relate to the deaths of Americans. Long ago, but still very relevant in terms of how some of these issues are playing out. At the same time that there is this stranglehold posture that the United States is having against the current modern-day moment of Cuba to try to pressure the regime by cutting off sources of their income and energy and all of those things that are ramping up the pressure. Timed also with the Secretary of State, who was not present today, talking to the Cuban people directly. So many layers to this, Tom. The document is important, the charges are important, but so is all the context we've been talking about.
And ultimately, a grand jury did choose to indict, and a jury will see the evidence at some point if Raúl Castro is ever brought to trial. I do want to bring in our senior White House correspondent, Gabe Gutierrez, for that part of the story. Gabe, we saw the acting attorney general there peppered by local Miami reporters with the key question, how does Raúl Castro stand trial for this, right? An arrest warrant will be issued, and from there, give me a second here, Gabe, and from there, obviously, there'll be steps in play to either take him out of Cuba or not. But right now, that's the big question.
Yeah, certainly, Tom, and that really stuck out to me when the acting attorney general said that. He said that, yes, an arrest warrant is issued, and he expects Raúl Castro to either come here on his own, which seems unlikely, or to show up here some other way, really laying the pretext for any operation to somehow grab Raúl Castro in Cuba. Now, as you've been talking about, this is very different than Venezuela. In Cuba, the significant military there, or certainly an intelligence operation. But you remember, Tom, in the Maduro raid, a lot of Maduro's security were Cubans. So there are a lot of questions about how this moves forward. We have reporting over the last several months that President Trump has been growing increasingly frustrated by the Cuban government remaining in power despite the fuel shortages that have erupted across the island. And if I can point out, Tom, this really points to, over the last decade or so, the sharp difference in policy from the Trump administration to the Obama administration before it. I was there in 2014, 2015 with that thaw of diplomatic relations between Cuba and the U.S. And you remember that last speaker, the Florida Attorney General, mentioned that, didn't name him by name, but President Obama actually attended a baseball game with Raúl Castro in Havana. And that was a reference to that. Certainly, Kelly was referring to the political dynamics of all this. But we see just how far the Trump administration has come from the Obama administration before it, making a calculation that it does not want any sort of talking with the Cuban regime. It's losing patience with it. And the CIA director's visit there last week, certainly the leaking of pictures from that visit amounted to an escalation of the pressure campaign. And you're right, that is the major question. What happens next? Will the U.S. now somehow go into Cuba and bring Raúl Castro back here to face these charges? He turns 95 years old next month.
All right, Gabe, stand by for us. I want to bring in Miriam de la Peña. Her son, Mario, was one of the 4 men killed when the planes they were on were shot down by the Cuban military. Miriam, I want to make sure you can hear me as we start this interview. Are you hearing me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Miriam, I am, first of all, I'm so sorry for what happened to your son, Mario. He was only 24 years old when this happened. I can't imagine what you and your husband and your entire family have struggled with for 30 years. If you can, talk to me about what this day means for you. And I know your family has been behind a lot of these potential indictments and lawsuits for so many years. But to finally hear someone like the Attorney Acting General to say that Raúl Castro has been indicted, what was that moment like for you?
This moment, it marks the beginning. It's the first day of us being on the road to find justice, something we have been asking for 30 years. It is amazing that this is happening. We are like overly hopeful that and thankful that finally our children are looked at as human beings who were murdered under a dictatorship, who extended their tentacles to international waters to kill American citizens, and that cannot be allowed.
Do you have confidence that Raúl Castro will ultimately face justice?
I think right now, if I were Raúl Castro, I would be very worried. I think he will eventually face justice, and if he dies before he can come to a U.S. court, he already knows that he is charged with murder, which he got away with for 30 years.
What is your understanding? Do you know why the Trump administration decided to do this now? Have they explained it to you?
No, but I think it's the right thing to do. I think he's doing it because it's the right thing to do. You kill American citizens. The United States needs to defend those citizens. You and I could have been killed. The United States needs to stand up for its citizens. What are we here for? To protect our citizens from murderers.
Yeah, on that point, there have been a lot of elected, administrations in this country that have turned their back on your family and turned their back on what happened there. I got to think after all these years and all those different administrations, today has to feel so much different.
I do feel different. I feel like we're human beings. Before, we were ignored. We're not ignored anymore. Our children were not ignored. There were 4 innocent men trying to do good for society, and they did not deserve to die that way.
If you can, while I have you, Miriam,
get away with it.
Yeah, while I have you here, can you tell our viewers a little bit about your son?
Yeah, Mario was born in New Jersey, never visited Cuba. We have not been back. We came when we were young, my husband and I, and we met here. And our children were born in the United States. They were raised in freedom. They were raised to do good. And if you do good, you're fine. You abide the law. And that's what he used to say all the time. I don't do anything wrong. I am trying to save lives. And because, there was a worry that Castro, we know the nature of the Castros. They are murderers. And they're not going to get away with it anymore.
And then finally, Miriam, what's your message? Yeah, what's your message to Raúl Castro today?
Raúl Castro, what is my message? You are going to get what you deserve. You are being called by what you are today. You are a murderer. Now, you will have in the United States, your rights will not be violated like you violate the rights of the Cuban people. You will have rights in the United States being respected, and you will serve a just sentence if you're found guilty, which I have no doubt that you will be found guilty.
Miriam de la Peña, your husband I know is right next to you. We thank you so much for talking to us. We are sorry for what you and your family have struggled through and gone through over these 30 years. And I know today is a monumental day for you. We shall see what shall happen in the days and weeks ahead. We thank you for joining our coverage. Miriam de la Peña there. If you've been watching us, we are coming on the air with that breaking news. Raúl Castro, along with several other Cubans, including a former Cuban pilot, have been indicted now by the U.S. government. Here are some of the charges: conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals, 2 counts of destruction of aircraft, 4 counts of murder. We are waiting at any moment the arrest warrant for Raúl Castro, the former head of Cuba, who many still believe is really in charge of that communist island. We're going to continue to follow this story throughout the day. This is going to conclude this NBC News special report for now. We are going to have much, much more ahead on NBC News Daily and on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCNews.com. I'm going to have a full wrap-up tonight on NBC Nightly News and some key players on Top Story. I'm Tom Llamas. We thank you for watching. We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.